Okay, today I'm going to talk about the announcement of Jake Paul and Anthony Joshua. Also going to recap last weekend's rematch between Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn. Now, first of all, with the Jake Paul and Anthony Joshua fight that's coming up, big announcement. Me personally, I don't think this fight's going to go ahead. I think there's no way this fight goes ahead. I think that looking on Jake Paul's career, it makes no sense. Jake Paul is obviously a master businessman. He's made, all of his fights in the past have been calculated. And with Jake Paul, I've pretty much, I've bet on pretty much all of his fights, and I've been right pretty much on all his fights. And there were two times in his career where he had fights lined up. He had press conferences that happened, and I had a lot of money backed on his opponent. And at the last minute, the fight got cancelled. So obviously, one of those fights was the last one in Gervonta Davis, and fair enough reason that he cancelled the fight, because Gervonta Davis had a lot of issues that I think that if it was a big fight on Netflix, I think all of that would have came to the head. I don't know how serious those accusations are, but violence against women, I think that Jake Paul probably made the right call, but I definitely think that he would have lost badly in that fight, and I had a lot of money on Gervonta Davis to beat Jake Paul, and I definitely think that would happen. I definitely think Jake Paul got a get out of jail free card for that one. But another fight that the fight got cancelled, and I really thought that Jake Paul would lose the fight, and had a lot of money on the opponent, was a fighter called Eubank Jr. Now, the fight was a while ago, and I don't think too many people know about him or even remember that fight happening. But the build up, the press conference, everything. But I was certain in that fight Jake Paul would lose. I thought that in the build up, Jake Paul, I think he knew it too. So the fight got cancelled. I don't really know what the reason was, but I had a lot of money on him to win that fight, and the fight got cancelled. So I think that just looking at the history, Jake Paul, he's a very smart guy, and he's in the position he's in because he's a smart guy. All of his opponents have been pretty much smaller than him, no boxing experience, and he generally wants to look good. So this fight against Anthony Joshua, it's definitely not going to be a good look for him. What's going to happen in this fight, because if the fight does go ahead, then I think that Jake Paul, he can't ever have another critic again, because it's basically suicide what he's doing. Anthony Joshua, he is no longer in his prime, but he is one of the most dangerous men on the planet with boxing gloves. He is one of the best heavyweights in the world. He's probably one of the hardest punchers in the world, and he has high boxing skill. Anthony Joshua, he's not at the elite level anymore as far as his last loss in Daniel Dubois. But against Jake Paul, the first time he hits Jake Paul, the fight's going to be over. So I definitely don't think that Jake Paul, he's not a dumb guy. I think obviously if he does take the fight, he gets all the credit in the world for being, one of the bravest guys ever. And all of his critics really can't criticize him anymore. He has so many critics, but if he does take this fight and he does go ahead, he really win, lose, or draw. Even if he gets flattened in 20 seconds, if the fight lasts 20, 30 seconds, he still took the test. He still did what the entire world didn't think that he could do, and, fighting a heavyweight fighter. That's completely opposite to what he's been doing his entire career. Me personally, I think that the only one that truly knows what's going to happen is Jake Paul. I don't think this fight goes ahead. I think he's stringing everyone along, including, Matchroom, Anthony Joshua, Netflix, The Zone. I just don't think this fight's going to happen. I think that when it gets closer to the fight, Jake Paul, he's going to find a reason to get out. I just think that way just because of the two times that I put money against Jake Paul. When I really thought he was going to lose, he ended up cancelling the fight. So I just don't think the fight's going to happen. Now, as far as the rematch between Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn. Now, in my prediction, I said that the only way I saw Eubank Jr. losing this fight was if he was weight drained again, like the first fight. Now, when I made my prediction, I wasn't 100% if they had the same rehydration stimulation as the last fight, but they did, and I was unaware of that. And if I knew that Chris Eubank Jr. was going to be drained like the last fight, I definitely wouldn't have picked him to win. But he wasn't like the last fight. For the last fight, I think he was maybe fighting at 30%. This fight, Chris Eubank Jr. was maybe fighting at 5-10%. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't really a fight. Conor Benn actually, and I did say this in my prediction, I said that he would be stronger, as in it's his second fight in middleweight, so he would have filled out more, and he definitely looked stronger. He looked like the bigger fighter. Conor Benn is a very explosive fighter. He's explosive just like the last fight, but he looked bigger, he looked stronger, and he definitely fought a better fight. He was a lot more patient. He used the jab. He was tremendous with the feints. He did great, and he looked great. But you can look great against a heavy bag. Chris Eubank Jr. was a heavy bag. He had nothing in that fight. I know Conor Benn, he technically was better for this fight, but I really can't give him credit for beating a zombie. Chris Eubank Jr., I will say this, he has no one to blame but himself. I really can't give him too much sympathy for how he looked, because if you're going to agree to the same stimulation that almost killed you in the first fight, everybody knew it. There were so many things that came out after the first fight, the dehydration, he spent time in hospital, his father warning him, and Chris Eubank Sr. was obviously right all along. So I don't think Chris Eubank Jr. can get any sympathy, really, because he put himself in that position. I said in my prediction, if he loses because of the weight hydration, again, he only has himself to blame. So I definitely can't give Eubank Jr. sympathy for losing. It's his own fault. He put the loss on the Eubank name. It's all on him. It's all on him. I really can't give, unfortunately, Conor Benn too much credit. But at the end of the day, it was a payday for both fighters. I think both fighters are set for life. Conor Benn technically gets the victory for the Benn name, but as far as a masterclass performance, like everybody was saying, I can't give it to him, because honestly, there were featherweights. There's a lightweight fighters, featherweight fighters that would have beat Chris Eubank Jr. Clarissa Shields' last opponent probably could have beat Chris Eubank Jr. He was completely done. No strength, no energy. You could tell he had no strength and no energy. He had nothing on his punches. It was hard to watch. And, Conor Benn, he was at his best. He was at 100%. He had the most weight he'd ever been in his life, but that didn't slow him down. And if anything, it made him more powerful. I think that it was the best he ever looked. Now, as far as what's next for both fighters, I think that Chris Eubank Jr., even if he does come back at super middleweight, light heavyweight, I don't think that he should fight for at least a few years. And if he does come back, it should be at super middleweight or light heavyweight. But honestly, he might be permanently done. His punch resistance might be finished completely, because, if you look at Roy Jones Jr., when he cut weight from heavyweight, that really ruined him for life. That really ruined his punch resistance for life. And even if Eubank isn't weight drained, in the future, if he does come back, I think he's permanently done after this. Now, as far as Conor Benn, I think for him, going back to welterweight is what he says he wants to do, but hopefully he can do it. I definitely want to see him against world-class opposition. He's strong. He has a very, very exciting style, and I definitely would like to see him against world competition. I think that 154, I think Virgil Ortiz and Jaron Ennis, they might be too much for him, so I think his best bet is to go down to welterweight. But I think he had a lot of muscle in this fight against Eubank Jr. He had a lot of muscle. And I think that sometimes in life, things, they spin right back to you. So I think that it is going to be a tough cut to get down to welterweight, because in his last fight, he's going to have to lose muscle. He looked like pure muscle in the fight against Eubank Jr. So if he's going to get down to 147 pounds or the welterweight division, he's definitely going to lose muscle. So hopefully he can do it. I think he's young enough to where he can still be strong after a tough weight cut. So hopefully he can do it. Hopefully Conor Benn can fight for a world title. I think at welterweight, if he's strong, if he's healthy, if the cut doesn't hurt him so much, I think he can beat Barrios. I think he can beat Ryan Garcia. I think he can beat pretty much all of the fighters at welterweight. Welterweight is not too strong right now as a division, so I definitely think Conor Benn can do really, really well at a welterweight if the weight cut doesn't kill him. And really, the only thing that he's doing right now is fighting for legacy, because those 2 fights against Eubank pretty much set him for life financially, I'm pretty sure. So he's just fighting for legacy. I definitely don't think there's going to be a rematch between Benn and Eubank. To be honest, in both fights, I mean, the first fight was a classic, but in the first fight, Eubank Jr., he was dead from the weight cut. But I think that this fight, I think a lot of people think that he was 100% for the first fight. But in the first fight, he was nearly dead from the weight cut, and the second fight wasn't even really a fight. So I definitely think that there's 0% chance it can be a third fight. But again, all the fault lies on Eubank Jr.'s shoulders. Dumb move. Dumb move, agreeing to the weight hydration again. Eubank Sr. clearly was right all along. Everything he said, he got validated for. And I don't know if he will be saying it, but he definitely can say for the rest of his life to Eubank Jr., I told you so. And as far as Conor Benn, his career, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing him do well. But yeah, that's my recap to the fight last weekend. Don't really, it wasn't really a fight, but, it is what it is.